Are you hoping to adopt? Well, my guess is that you might be a little worried or afraid at the thought of adopting an older child. And more than likely, the thought of adopting a teenager absolutely terrifies you. Today, I want to share a new perspective on age when it comes to adoption. And who knows, maybe by the end of this video, you will change your mind. Hey friend, if you've been around for a while, welcome back. If you're new here, I just wanted to say hi. My name is Katie and I'm an adoptive mom of 3 kids, ages 4 through 11, almost 12. I'm an adoption consultant, a wife, and a mom, and I'm so glad you're here. And I just wanted to mention that if you are someone who has a lot of questions about the adoption process and you want to get started but you're not really sure how, I am more than happy to help you. So I recently opened up my adoption consulting business, and I will include the link below if you would like to set up a call with me so that we can chat about your questions. I can research for you and help you find the answers you need to find to get started. Okay, now what you really came here for. Let's talk about why age isn't everything when it comes to adoption. If I had $1 for every time I heard a family very adamantly say they only want to adopt kids ages 5 or under, well, I'd have a lot of dollars. And I get it, I really do. Adopting a younger kid often sounds way less intimidating than adopting an older kid. After all, if you had a kid biologically, you would have raised them since birth, and you would have had all this time to kind of get used to being a parent before they hit the age where, well, they can talk back to you, and that they can have strong opinions about your parenting and what they do and do not like. My husband and I were in this camp as well, too. At the beginning of our adoption process, we truly thought we would only be open to adopting, I think, between ages 1 and 5. I don't know if we were willing to go above that, but I know it was a fairly low range. And as we went through our trainings and met more people, our minds kind of opened slowly to the idea of adopting older children as well. And I just want to do some myth busting here before we jump in. I hope you already know this, but if you don't, that's fine. I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that even if you adopt a child as an infant, they will still have trauma, because being adopted in and of itself is trauma. Having separation from your birth parent is trauma. So if you have friends or family members, or maybe even you're kind of saying this to yourself, that if you adopt a younger kid or especially a baby, that child will not have any trauma and you'll never have to worry about that, well, I hate to break it to you, but that's just not true. And it really doesn't matter what age the child was adopted at. It still has the potential of affecting their mental and emotional health as they get older, whether or not they ever find out they're adopted. But I sincerely hope they know they're adopted. That's a different topic for a different day. Today I want to look at age and adoption a little differently, because I personally feel like older kids get a bad rap and we kind of think that they're not going to be as easy to parent, or it's going to be too hard, or we can't handle it. But the truth is, a lot of these kids are full of hope and resilience, and they're just great kids who need a family. So here are some reasons why I think you should be at least open to the idea of adopting older kids. First off is I believe there's this fear that if you are open to adopting older kids, you will only be able to adopt an older kid, and I can tell you from personal experience that that is not true. My husband and I were open to adopting up to the age of 10, and we were open to adopting up to 4 kids, which I think that might have been a little much for us personally, but we were open to it, and we were still matched with an 18-month-old. I want to just be clear that being matched with an 18-month-old is pretty rare, and I don't want to set this false expectation that that happens all the time, but I just want to show you that just because you say you're open to adopting kids that are older does not mean that you have to say yes if you are presented with a case file for a child and you feel like it's not the best fit for you. And it should not affect your ability to get a match or to adopt moving forward in any way. All it means is that you will have the option of actually seeing files for older children, and it kind of widens your pool and it makes it more likely that you will be matched sooner. Not to mention that you may find that when you read the file of an older kid, it really fits with your family a lot better and you could be a great parent to that kid, but you don't know yet, because not all toddlers are the same, not all babies are the same, and not all older kids or teenagers are the same, right? So why not give yourself an opportunity to be a little more open and just know that you do not have to say yes when it really comes down to it if it doesn't feel right. The second reason I think you should be open to the idea of older children is that we have this false narrative that older kids always have more emotional issues from their trauma than younger kids do. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. It is very possible that a younger child may have more concerning behaviors than a child who is older, who is in foster care or is available for adoption. You actually may be shocked to hear about some of the trauma that these younger children have endured and some of the behaviors that are a result of that. While on the other hand, you may find out that an older child does not exhibit those same concerning behaviors and they may be a better match for your family. Basically, adopting a kid at a younger age is not a guarantee in any way that your child will be better off, they'll have less mental health issues, nothing of the sort. There's absolutely no way to truly predict that, and age definitely is not the way to predict that. And on the flip side, you may actually find that a lot of older children actually are more well adjusted than you would think. I know in our situation, our child who we adopted at the age of 11, she came to us after being in a really stable, loving, caring foster home for 3 years. And that stability that she had actually helped her a lot. And she has had no major concerning behaviors to us. Every kid who's adopted who has trauma, every kid in general, has their own struggles and their own issues. But truly, it has been amazing to see how much she's overcome in a short period of time and how we've never really had to deal with anything super concerning when it comes to her behavior. When we were matched with her, I believe we were the only family that was interested in adopting her and my son because of the age of the children. So at the time, my son was 5 and my daughter was 9. I think if it was just my son, he would have had a much easier time being adopted. But in this case, they wanted to keep siblings together, and her age was really preventing a lot of people from saying yes, even though, I think she's had a much easier time and much better adjustment than many kids have had. Meanwhile, I have friends who have adopted under the age of 5 or at the age of 5, and because of the trauma that their child experienced before they adopted them, this child has had many, many struggles and issues and has also needed residential care. And, so who's to say that a younger child necessarily means that they have less issues and less things to work through? So I really just be open to the idea of an older child, because it doesn't always have to be this horror story or that everything's going to be awful or it's going to be so hard. You just want to at least leave yourself open to the possibility. Another reason why I think you should consider adopting older kids is that younger kids don't always cognitively understand the concept of adoption, and they don't realize what is truly happening to them. This can make their trauma, I think, even greater because there's no way to verbally explain to them what is going on. We experienced this with adopting our youngest. She was only 18 months when we met her, and she moved in with us shortly after, and for her, we couldn't quite explain to her what adoption was or what it meant for her future. We just had to try to make her feel as safe and loved as possible, but she really struggled. She knew that we were the wrong set of people taking care of her. And what happened to her foster mom? What happened to that house and that family? And we could not explain to her, this is for your good. This is so you can have a good future and you can have a family. She doesn't understand that. And so I found that extremely challenging to deal with. On the other hand, our older kids actually had a much better understanding of what adoption was. Obviously, our oldest child had the best understanding. Our son, it took him a while to fully grasp it, but I really would say it took him maybe a few months of living with us to understand what was happening. Whereas with my oldest daughter, she was actually excited to be adopted. She was looking forward to it. She knew about it. And her social worker had even walked her through a book about adoption and preparing for adoption so that she was more prepared and had an okay understanding of what was going to be occurring. And with older kids, you can talk to them about adoption too, and you can talk with them through their feelings and figure out where they're coming from and work through some of those negative emotions that the child is going to have coming alongside adoption, because adoption is trauma, adoption is separation from birth families. So you can actually have those conversations, whereas with a younger kid, they're just going to be acting out to communicate with you, and that can be extremely challenging. Okay, my next point, I just want to preface this by saying I do not have facts or statistics to back up the statement I'm about to make. And I really prefer to have facts and statistics, but I don't actually know if there's been a study done on this or anything like that. I think it'd be fascinating if we did a study on this someday. I'll be the first to admit this is very anecdotal evidence, but I have noticed from all these different people I've followed and read about and read their stories, the people who tend to struggle the most with their adoption and with their identity are people who were adopted as infants or as toddlers. And I especially find this is true if they were adopted from another country or culture. But think about it, these adoptees never really had a chance to figure out their roots. They never had an opportunity to live with their birth families for any extended period of time, to kind of understand what life was like with them, to get to know them, and to see how they have similarities and differences from their birth parents. And because they don't really know what the alternative life would have been for them if they had not been adopted, I think they have a natural curiosity about it, and they really want to know and get in touch with their birth families and their past. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. I have noticed that quite a few of these adoptees who were adopted at birth, they're very angry about adoption. They're very upset about how they were raised, that they were separated from their birth families, and those feelings are completely valid. But I just want to say that I do think we have this false narrative again, that if we adopt an infant or we adopt a young toddler, that their adoption is never going to have a huge effect on them, that they're not going to suffer the effects of trauma. And that is just not true. Meanwhile, again, anecdotal experience from stories I've read, the adoptees that seem to struggle less with these identity issues and feel less frustrated with the concept of being adopted are people who were adopted at older ages, especially like as a teenager or as an older elementary kid or middle school kid. That's not to say they don't struggle with identity. I think every adopted child struggles with that at some point and questioning it, and how are they like their birth parents? How are they not like their birth parents? Are their birth parents all bad in their mind? Are they all good in their mind? That's very normal no matter what age a child is adopted at, but it is very interesting to me that the adoptees who seem more okay with their adoption story, a lot of them were adopted when they were older. And I think a big reason for this is not only do these adoptees understand what the alternative would be if they weren't adopted, whether that was staying in foster care and aging out, or possibly going back to an unsafe situation with birth parents, they also have the benefit of knowing their birth family. They've met their birth family, they spent significant time with them, and even if there was abuse or neglect that happened during that time, they still have more of a connection to their birth family than someone who was adopted as an infant. And I think they don't have to question as much and imagine what life would have been like. Now, obviously, with open adoptions with infants, this is changing a lot, which I think is good, because now a lot of people adopted as infants, they actually do have some sort of connection with birth parents. They don't have to wonder as much about it. But I know that's not always the case, and so I do think sometimes having an older kid who knows what's going on makes it a little bit easier for them. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, trauma affects kids at every age when it comes to adoption. There is no outlier of someone who just completely goes unscathed by trauma. Every single adopted child has trauma, whether they were adopted as an infant or whether they were adopted at age 16 or 17. And yeah, it's very possible that if you adopt a young toddler or a baby, they're not going to struggle with their adoption for quite a while. Usually it starts to come out in the teen years, and then as young adults, when they really start questioning their identity and figuring out who they are outside of their adopted family, who are their birth parents, and all of these things are so important to them. So yes, you may avoid kind of as much of the struggle at the beginning, but eventually those questions will arise, and eventually you will have to face some of that trauma and those issues that your children may have in the future. So these are some of the main reasons why I think you should at least consider being more open in your age range when it comes to adopting. I'm not saying in any means to take a placement you don't feel comfortable with or to say yes to something you don't think you could reasonably handle. I actually plan on making a video about that as well, so that'll be another video probably next week. But I do want you to at least consider being a little more open when it comes to age. I just think age matters a lot less than we think it does when it comes to adoption. You may find that you fall in love with the idea of adopting a 10-year-old kid whose profile you read. But if you aren't at least open to that, then you're not giving yourself that opportunity. And in my opinion, I think rather than being picky about age, I think you should be a little bit more picky about the types of diagnoses and all of those things that you believe you can provide for and that you can be a good parent for a child who has those diagnoses. That to me is more important than age. That's my opinion. You may disagree with me, but hopefully this at least got you thinking a little bit about opening that age range for your adoption. If I've got you thinking about this, but you're still not quite sure, I would love to have an adoption consultation with you. If you would like to chat with me over Skype or over Zoom, let's go ahead and set up that call. You can click the link below. It will take you right to my consultation calendar, and you can book a session with me. And that way I can hear about your specific situation and we can kind of chat through what options would be best for you as you pursue adoption. And I hope that if you haven't subscribed yet to my channel that you will do that so we can spend some more time together. It's truly a privilege to help you walk through this adoption process and figure out what things are right for your family and the ways that you can support a child who needs a home. So thanks for visiting. I hope you have a great week and I'll see you next time.